The distress signal pierced through the void of space like a dying star's final scream. Captain Zephyra of the Galactic Council's peacekeeping vessel Harmony's Light stared at the communication display with all four of her eyes wide in terror. The message was simple, desperate, and utterly hopeless. This is Commander Thrak of the Viridian Defense Fleet. Our world's burn. The Devourer swarm has broken through our outer rim defenses. 13 colonies have fallen silent. We estimate total planetary consumption within 47 standard cycles. We invoke Article 7 of the Galactic Mutual Defense Treaty. Please, anyone who can hear this transmission, we need immediate military assistance. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Zephyra's elongated fingers trembled as she replayed the message. The Devourer swarm. Every sentient being in the galaxy knew that name and feared it. They were an ancient terror that appeared every few thousand years, consuming entire star systems before vanishing back into the dark reaches of unexplored space. Captain, her communications officer, a crystalline being named Quartz, chimed with worry. We're receiving similar distress calls from 17 other sectors. The swarm isn't just attacking the Viridians. This appears to be a coordinated assault on multiple civilizations simultaneously. Zephyra closed her eyes and felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. As a member of the Galactic Council's Rapid Response Team, she had dealt with territorial disputes, trade disagreements, and minor skirmishes between species. But this was different. This was extinction-level threat that no single civilization could handle alone. Contact the Galactic Council immediately, she ordered. Priority Alpha, emergency session. And send out a general broadcast on all frequencies. Any civilization with military capabilities willing to assist should respond immediately. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The Council's emergency session was a chaos of panicked voices speaking in dozens of different languages and communication methods. The Altarian delegation spoke through color-changing displays, while the gaseous nebulans communicated via electromagnetic pulses. But despite their differences, every representative understood the gravity of the situation. The mathematical projections were terrifying. At the swarm's current rate of consumption, they would devour the entire Orion spiral arm within 2 standard years. Billions of sentient beings would be reduced to organic matter to fuel the swarm's endless hunger. The combined fleets of all Council member species total approximately 47,000 vessels, announced High Counselor Vex, a being that resembled a massive tree with glowing bark. Our best tactical simulations give us a 12% chance of stopping the swarm before they consume half the galaxy. 12%. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. What about requesting aid from non-council species, suggested Councilor Mareth, aquatic being speaking through a translation tank. Surely there are others who would help defend against mutual annihilation. We've already reached out to the shadows of Andromeda, the crystal hierarchies, and even the reclusive void singers, Vex replied grimly. They either lack sufficient military power or are too far away to arrive in time. The mathematical reality is simple. We do not possess the firepower necessary to stop this threat. Captain Zephyra watched the proceedings from her ship's communication hub, feeling helplessness wash over her. She had always believed that the galaxy's civilizations could overcome any challenge through cooperation and determination. But mathematics didn't lie, and the numbers painted a picture of inevitable doom. Then, unexpectedly, her ship's ancient long-range communication array began receiving signal. Not through the standard Galactic Council frequencies, but on an archaic band that hadn't been used for official communications in over 800 years. The signal was weak, distorted by interstellar interference, but unmistakably artificial. Quartz, are you picking this up? Zephyra called to her communications officer. Yes, Captain, but it's very strange. The signal is coming from the edge of the galaxy, from a region our star charts mark as unexplored. The transmission protocol is ancient, pre-Council era technology. Zephyra frowned. The edges of the galaxy were considered dead space, too far from any established trade routes or habitable systems to be worth exploring. What could possibly be out there? Clean it up as much as possible. Let's hear what they're saying. The voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike anything in the Council's linguistic databases. It was rough, guttural, and carried an odd quality that made Zephyra's skin crawl with an emotion she couldn't quite identify. Fear? No, not quite fear. Something primal and instinctual that her species had forgotten over millennia of civilization. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force. We've been monitoring your distress signals regarding the entity you call the Devourer Swarm. We know this enemy. We fought them before. If you want our help, send coordinates for a neutral meeting point. We'll be there in 72 hours. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Terrans, Quartz whispered. Captain, there's no record of any species called Terrans in our databases. And the linguistic analysis suggests their language predates any known galactic civilization by thousands of years. Zephyra stared at the communication console, her mind racing. Who were these Terrans? How did they know about the swarm? And, most importantly, what kind of beings lived in the unexplored reaches of space and claimed to have fought the galaxy's most feared enemy? She made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Open a channel to the Galactic Council. Tell them we may have found unexpected allies. And Quartz starts scanning that region of space they transmitted from. I want to know everything possible about these Terrans before we meet them. As her ship changed course toward the coordinates the mysterious humans would provide, Zephyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to encounter something that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about civilization, warfare, and survival. In the depths of space, ancient automated beacons began activating along the galaxy's rim. They had been dormant for nearly a millennium, waiting for a signal that their creators never thought would come again. Now, as the beacons powered up and began transmitting, they carried a simple message to hidden bases scattered throughout the cosmic void. The swarm has returned. Operation Death World is authorized. All units, prepare for full mobilization. The galaxy's greatest secret was about to be revealed, and the universe would never be the same. The neutral meeting point was established in the Kepler Drift, a region of space between major star systems where gravitational forces created a natural stopping point for interstellar travel. Captain Zephyra arrived first, her ship Harmony's light maintaining a respectful distance from the coordinates. Behind her came the hastily assembled First Contact diplomatic team, representatives from 12 different species, all chosen for their experience in dealing with unknown civilizations. Nobody knew what to expect from these mysterious Terrans. The galactic databases contained no records of their species, their technology, or their homeworld. Even more puzzling was their claim to have fought the Devourer Swarm before. According to every historical record, the swarm had never been successfully resisted, only temporarily driven away after consuming their fill. Captain, Quartz announced from the communications station, I'm detecting massive gravitational distortions approaching our position. Whatever's coming, it's big. Zephyra appeared at her display screens, expecting to see a traditional spacecraft emerge from hyperspace. Instead, reality itself seemed to tear open like fabric being cut with a burning knife. The tear widened, revealing a glimpse of something that defied comprehension. Not the familiar swirling colors of hyperspace, but absolute darkness punctuated by distant stars that belonged to no known constellation. What emerged from that impossible portal made every being on the bridge take an involuntary step backward. The ship was wrong on a fundamental level. Where Galactic Council vessels were designed with smooth curves and aesthetic beauty, this craft looked like it had been forged in the heart of a dying star and beaten into shape with asteroids. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals and materials, scarred with what could only be battle damage that had been repaired countless times. Weapons bristled from every surface. Not the elegant energy projectors favored by civilized species, but crude, brutal-looking cannons that seemed designed for one purpose: maximum destruction. By the void, whispered Ambassador Krell, a dignified Altarian whose species prided itself on never showing emotion. What manner of beings build such monstrosities? The human ship, for that's what it had to be, was easily 3 times the size of the largest Council warship, and every sensor reading confirmed Zephyra's worst fears. The energy signatures coming from that vessel suggested weapons capable of cracking planets, and shields that could withstand the gravitational pull of a black hole. Incoming transmission, Quartz reported, his crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. They're using our own communication protocols somehow. audio and visual. Put it through, Zephyra commanded, straightening her uniform and trying to project the dignity befitting a representative of galactic civilization. The screen flickered to life, and Zephyra found herself looking at something that made her question everything she thought she knew about evolution and biology. The being on the screen was bipedal like several species in the galaxy, but there was something fundamentally different about it. Its eyes held a depth of experience that seemed ancient despite the creature's apparently young face. More unsettling were the scars, visible marks of violence that no civilized being would display so openly. "I'm Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force," the being said, and Zephyr noticed that its voice carried the same rough quality as the original transmission. "You can call me Admiral Chun. I understand you're dealing with a swarm incursion." Ambassador Krell stepped forward, his color-changing skin displaying the formal patterns of diplomatic greeting. "Admiral Chun, I am Ambassador Krell, speaking for the Galactic Council. We appreciate your response to our distress calls, but we must confess confusion. Our records contain no mention of your species or your civilization. How is it that you know of the Devourer Swarm?" Admiral Chen's expression shifted in a way that would have been called a smile in any other context, but on this scarred face, it looked predatory. "That's because your records only go back about 12,000 years, and they only cover this part of the galaxy. Humanity has been fighting the swarm for longer than your civilizations have existed." The statement hung in the air like a physical weight. 12,000 years was when the first Galactic Council had been formed, marking the beginning of recorded galactic history. Before that, the galaxy had been a collection of isolated civilizations with no contact between distant systems. "Impossible," declared Dr. Yanara, the Council's chief xenobiologist. "No species could survive in deep space for that long. The requirements for maintaining a civilization without planetary resources are beyond current technology." Admiral Chen's predatory smile widened. "Dr. Yanara, isn't it? I recognize the biosignature of a Sethari. Your people make excellent scientists, but you think too small. You assume that survival requires maintaining the same civilization you started with. Humans learned long ago that adaptation beats preservation." She gestured, and the camera view pulled back to show more of the ship's bridge. What Zephyr saw made her stomach turn with a mixture of horror and fascination. The human ship's crew was diverse beyond anything in the galaxy. She could identify what appeared to be modified humans, but also creatures that defied classification. Some seemed to be partially mechanical. Others appear to have been genetically altered to survive in environments that would kill most life forms. "You see," Admiral Chen continued, "when the swarm first attacked our worlds, we had a choice. We could die with dignity, or we could become something that could hunt them across the stars. We chose to become hunters." "What happened to your homeworld?" Zephyra asked softly. "Terra still exists, but it's not what you'd call habitable anymore. We turned it into a fortress world, a factory for producing everything we need to wage eternal war. Most of humanity lives in space now, in fleets like this one. We've been following the swarm for 800 years, striking at their rear guard, rescuing survivors when possible, and learning everything we can about how to kill them permanently." The diplomatic team exchanged glances filled with horror and fascination. These humans had willingly transformed themselves into something barely recognizable, abandoning their homeworld and their original nature to become living weapons against a cosmic threat. Ambassador Krell's colors shifted to display deep concern. "Admiral, while we appreciate your willingness to assist, the Galactic Council must consider the implications of allying with Forgive Me, but your people appear to have embraced a philosophy of violence that runs counter to civilized principles." For a moment, Admiral Chen's expression hardened, and Zephyra caught a glimpse of something that made her species' ancient predator avoidance instincts scream warnings. Then, the human composed herself and spoke with careful patience. "Ambassador, in the next 48 hours, the swarm will consume the Viridian homeworld and approximately 4 billion sentient beings. In the following week, they'll consume 3 more systems. Your civilized principles won't protect you from digestion. Your beautiful ships with their elegant curves will be converted into biomass. Your children will become nutrients for creatures that view intelligence as nothing more than a seasoning. She leaned forward, and her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We've seen this happen to 237 different species over the past 8 centuries. Some of them had philosophies very similar to yours. They all died beautifully, with great dignity and absolutely perfect principles. The swarm didn't care. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Finally, Captain Zephyra spoke the question that everyone was thinking. What do you need from us? Admiral Chen's predatory smile returned. 3 things. First, complete tactical data on the swarm's current positions and movements. Second, detailed specifications on your shield technologies. We can adapt them for better protection. Third, absolute authority to conduct operations without interference from your politicians. The Galactic Council would never agree to that last point. Ambassador Krell protested. We cannot simply hand over military authority to an unknown species. Then, enjoy your extinction, Admiral Chun replied flatly. Because that's your alternative. We fought the swarm for 8 centuries. We know how they think, how they move, how they can be killed. But we can't do it alone, and we can't do it with committees of politicians second-guessing every decision. She stood up, and the camera followed her movement. You have 6 hours to decide. Either trust the monsters you've never heard of to save you from the monsters you can't kill, or spend your remaining time composing beautiful poetry about the dignity of your destruction. We'll be monitoring your communications. The transmission ended, leaving the diplomatic team staring at a blank screen. After a long moment, Dr. Yanara spoke softly. Did anyone else notice that their ship showed no signs of recent construction? The hull damage, the repairs, the weapon modifications. That vessel has been in active combat for decades, possibly centuries. Zephyra nodded slowly. They're not offering to help us fight the swarm. They're offering to let us help them continue a war they've been fighting since before civilizations learned to leave their home systems. The question now was whether the galaxy was desperate enough to ally with beings who had willingly become monsters in order to hunt even greater monsters. As reports continued to arrive of swarm fleets consuming entire solar systems, that desperation was growing by the hour. In the depths of space around the Kepler drift, long-range sensors detected movement. More tiers in reality were opening, and more impossible ships were emerging from the darkness between stars. The humans hadn't come alone. They had brought an entire war fleet, and every vessel bore the scars of countless battles against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. The age of innocence was ending, and the age of necessary monsters was about to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 18 hours straight. Representatives from across the galaxy participated via quantum entanglement communicators, their images flickering in the vast circular chamber on the neutral world of Concordia. The debate had grown increasingly desperate as more worlds fell silent. High Counselor Vex's bark-like skin had darkened to a deep brown, indicating extreme stress. The situation continues to deteriorate. We've lost contact with the entire Zeta Reticuli sector. 16 billion beings gone without a trace. The human fleet is still waiting at Kepler Drift, reported Captain Zephyra via her ship's communication system. Admiral Chun has made it clear they won't wait much longer. Every hour we delay is another system the swarm consumes. Counselor Maretha's tentacles writhed in her aquatic tank as she spoke. But the implications of accepting their terms are staggering. They're asking for complete military autonomy, access to all our technological databases, and the right to recruit volunteers from our populations. They're essentially asking us to surrender control of the defense effort to a species we know nothing about. A species that admits to having abandoned their home world and modified themselves into living weapons, added Ambassador Krell, his skin displaying patterns of deep concern. How do we know they won't simply replace the swarm as a galactic threat? Dr. Yanara, who had spent the last 12 hours analyzing every scrap of data about the humans, spoke from her research station. Counselors, I've been studying the technical specifications of the human fleet. Their technology is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to be a hybrid of dozens of different technological approaches, many of which violate our understanding of physical laws. She activated a holographic display showing the scans of Admiral Chen's ship. Look at these energy readings. Their main weapons appear to channel what can only be described as controlled stellar collapse. Their armor isn't just metal and composites. It's infused with crystallized space-time that creates localized gravity distortions. This isn't technology developed by a single species. This is the accumulated knowledge of every civilization they've encountered over 8 centuries of warfare. The revelation sent ripples of unease through the assembled representatives. If the humans had been collecting technology from other species for centuries, what had happened to those species? High Counselor Vex's voice carried a tremor as he asked the question they were all thinking. Dr. Yanara, in your analysis of their technology, did you find any evidence of how they acquired it? The xenobiologist's response was barely above a whisper. Some of it appears to be voluntary technology exchange, but much of it shows signs of having been salvaged from destroyed vessels and dead worlds. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans weren't just warriors. They were scavengers, collecting the technological remains of civilizations that had failed to survive their encounters with cosmic threats. Ambassador Krell's colors shifted to display patterns of horror. They're grave robbers. They follow destruction across the galaxy and pick clean the bones of dead civilizations. Or, Captain Zephyra interjected from her ship, they're the only beings in the galaxy with the courage to learn from failures and the determination to ensure those sacrifices weren't meaningless. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the council chamber. Emergency broadcasts flooded in from monitoring stations across the galaxy. Counselors, announced the chamber's AI coordinator, we're receiving priority alerts from the Rigel sector. The swarm has divided into multiple fleets. They're not just attacking randomly anymore. Analysis indicates they're moving in a coordinated pattern designed to cut off retreat routes and prevent refugees from escaping to safe systems. High Counselor Vex manipulated the central holographic display, showing the galaxy-wide tactical situation. Red markers indicated swarm positions, while yellow markers showed the last known locations of threatened civilizations. The pattern was clear and terrifying. They're hurting us, Vex whispered, like livestock being driven towards slaughter. Dr. Yanara's voice was grim as she updated her analysis. The mathematical projections have changed. At this accelerated rate of consumption, we have perhaps 40 standard cycles before they reach the Council core worlds. And that's assuming they don't develop new tactical approaches as they learn more about our defensive capabilities. 40 cycles. Less than 2 months before the heart of galactic civilization would be under attack by a force that had never been successfully resisted. Captain Zephyra's image leaned forward in the communication display. Counselors, I'm going to share something that Admiral Chun told me during a private communication yesterday. She said that in 800 years of fighting the swarm, they've learned one critical truth. The swarm doesn't just consume matter and energy. They consume information. Every civilization they devour makes them smarter, more adaptable, more dangerous. The captain paused, letting the full horror of that revelation sink in. Every world that falls to them makes them stronger. Every technology they encounter gets added to their capabilities. Every defensive strategy they overcome teaches them new ways to kill. And, according to the humans, this particular swarm attack is different from any they've encountered before. Different how? Counselor Mareth asked, her aquatic tank bubbling with agitation. Zephyr's expression was grim. This time, they're not just consuming randomly. They're targeting specific civilizations in a specific order. They're learning about galactic civilization systematically, building up to something the humans call a convergence event. High Counselor Vex's bark began to crack with stress. What is a convergence event? According to Admiral Chun, it's when a swarm has consumed enough civilizations and gained enough knowledge to begin creating. Instead of just being destroyers, they become builders. They start constructing something new using all the information they've gathered. The implications were beyond horrifying. A force with the swarm's destructive capabilities that could also create and innovate would be unstoppable on a cosmic scale. Dr. Yanara's voice was barely audible as she spoke. How do the humans know all this? Captain Zephyra was quiet for a long moment before responding. Because they've been tracking this particular swarm for 300 years. They've watched it consume 17 different galactic civilizations. And They know that if it succeeds in triggering a convergence event in our galaxy, it will become powerful enough to threaten other galaxies. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives began speaking over each other in dozens of languages. The revelation that their galaxy wasn't the first to face this threat, that entire galactic civilizations had already fallen to this enemy, transformed the crisis from a fight for survival into something incomprehensibly larger. High Counselor Vex activated the chamber's emergency protocols, restoring order through automated translation systems. When quiet returned, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. We will put this to a vote. All in favor of accepting the humans' terms and granting them full authority over the defense effort. The voting took less than 3 minutes. The result was unanimous. Captain Zephyra opened a communication channel to the human fleet. Admiral Chen's scarred face appeared on screen almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for the call. "Admiral," Zephyra said formally, "the Galactic Council accepts your terms. Full military authority is granted to the Terran Defense Force. What are your orders?" Admiral Chen's predatory smile was sharper than before. "First order, full evacuation of all non-essential personnel from the core worlds. Second, immediate mobilization of every combat-capable vessel in the galaxy. Third, send me your 50 best scientists and engineers. We're going to teach them how to build weapons that can kill gods." She paused, and her expression became deadly serious. "And Captain, start preparing your people for what they're about to see. Because we're not just going to teach you how to fight the swarm. We're going to show you what it really means to refuse extinction. The galaxy is about to learn why humans don't have a word for surrender." As the transmission ended, automated systems throughout human space began awakening technologies that had been dormant for decades. Ancient shipyards powered up, their forges beginning to burn with the light of captured stars. Weapons that violated the fundamental laws of physics were brought online and prepared for deployment. And in the deepest vaults of Terra's fortress moon, something stirred that had been sleeping since the last convergence event 300 years ago. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the only way to fight monsters was to become something even more monstrous. And humanity had spent 8 centuries perfecting that transformation. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin, and the rules of civilized warfare were about to be rewritten by beings who had forgotten what it meant to be civilized. The transformation of the galaxy began within hours of the Council's decision. Human fleets emerged from the dark spaces between stars like a plague of mechanical locusts, each ship scarred and modified for a specific purpose in a war that had lasted longer than most civilizations' entire histories. Dr. Yanara found herself aboard the human command vessel Eternal Grudge, trying to understand technologies that seemed to mock every law of physics she had spent her lifetime studying. The human chief engineer, a being called Marcus whose left arm had been replaced with a mechanical appendage that hummed with contained energy, guided her through a weapons laboratory that defied comprehension. "This is a gravity implosion cannon," Marcus explained, his voice carrying the casual tone of someone discussing kitchen utensils. "It creates a localized black hole that lasts exactly 0.3 seconds before safely dissipating. Perfect for eliminating swarm bioships without the risk of permanent gravitational anomalies." "Dr." Yanara stared at the weapon, her scientific mind reeling. "The energy requirements alone should make this impossible. How do you power such a device?" Marcus grinned, and she noticed that several of his teeth had been replaced with what appeared to be crystallized starlight. "We learned to tap vacuum energy about 600 years ago. When you're fighting an enemy that consumes entire star systems for fuel, you have to get creative about power sources." He led her to another section of the laboratory, where weapons that hurt to look at were being assembled by technicians whose bodies showed varying degrees of mechanical enhancement. "These are psychic disruption arrays. The swarm uses a form of distributed consciousness to coordinate their attacks. Hit them with the right frequency of mental static, and their coordination breaks down." "Psychic warfare," Dr. Yanara whispered, "but that violates the fundamental principles of scientific materialism. Consciousness can't be weaponized." "Tell that to the ethereal collective," Marcus replied grimly. They were a civilization of pure psychic energy that inhabited gas giants in the Magellanic clouds. The swarm learned to eat thoughts by consuming them. So we learned to poison thoughts by studying what was left. The revelation that the humans had encountered and learned from civilizations that existed as pure consciousness sent chills through Dr. Yanara's exoskeleton. How many impossible things had humanity witnessed in their centuries of warfare? Meanwhile, Captain Zephyra was aboard Admiral Chen's flagship, observing the human approach to fleet coordination. What she saw challenged every assumption about military organization and command structure. The human fleet operated on principles that seemed chaotic to outside observers, but revealed a deeper pattern when studied closely. Individual ship commanders had enormous autonomy, making tactical decisions that would normally require authorization from multiple levels of command. Yet somehow, the overall strategy remained coherent and devastatingly effective. Your command structure appears completely decentralized, Zephyra observed as she watched the tactical displays. How do you maintain coordination without clear hierarchical control? Admiral Chun gestured to a communications officer whose skull had been partially replaced with quantum processors. Traditional command structures assume that higher authority has better information than frontline units. That works fine when you're fighting conventional enemies. But the swarm adapts to predictable patterns. The moment we start using rigid command structures, they learn to target command vessels and decapitate our leadership. She pulled up a holographic display showing the human fleet's organizational model. So we adapted. Every ship in our fleet is capable of independent operation. Every captain has complete tactical authority. Every crew member is trained to command if necessary. The swarm can destroy our ships, but they can't destroy our ability to fight. The hologram zoomed in to show individual human vessels, each uniquely modified and equipped for specific roles. Look closely at our ship designs. No two are exactly alike. Each one represents a different approach to solving the problem of killing something that seems unkillable. Some focus on overwhelming firepower, others on stealth and precision strikes. Some are designed to ram swarm bioships at relativistic speeds. Others carry weapons that attack the quantum foundation of matter itself. Zephyra studied the display, beginning to understand the terrifying genius of human warfare. You've created a fleet where every ship is an experiment. You're constantly testing new approaches to combat. Exactly. And every time we lose a ship, we learn something new about what doesn't work. Every time we win a battle, we analyze exactly how and why we won. After 8 centuries, we've accumulated more practical knowledge about cosmic warfare than any other civilization in history. Admiral Chen's expression grew grim as she manipulated the display to show the current positions of swarm fleets. Which brings us to our current problem. This particular swarm has been studying galactic civilization for months before we detected them. They've been observing your defensive strategies, learning your technological capabilities, analyzing your coordination methods. The display zoomed in to show the tactical situation around the Viridian system, where the largest swarm fleet was consolidating after consuming 3 inhabited worlds. They know about us now. They've detected our fleet signatures, and they're adapting their approach. This is no longer a simple consumption operation. They're preparing for a war. As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The tactical officer, whose eyes have been replaced with direct neural interfaces to the ship's sensor systems, announced the situation with mechanical precision. Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from a swarm fleet in the Viridian system. Analysis indicates they're constructing something large. Estimated completion in 18 hours. Admiral Chen cursed in a language that made Captain Zephyra's translator implant emit error sounds. They're building a convergence node. They're not planning to wait until they've consumed enough civilizations. They're going to force a convergence event with what they've already learned. What does that mean? Zephyra asked, though she dreaded the answer. It means they're preparing to birth something new. A hybrid of their destructive capabilities and the technological knowledge they've stolen from consumed civilizations. If they succeed, they won't just be an unstoppable force of consumption. They'll be an unstoppable force of creation, building new types of threats we've never encountered. The Admiral turned to address her entire bridge crew. All vessels, Priority Alpha transmission. Operation Death World is now active. Begin final preparations for convergence interdiction protocols. Across the human fleet, ships that had seemed impossibly large suddenly began transforming. Hidden compartments opened to reveal weapons that dwarfed anything previously visible. Entire sections of hull plating retracted to expose mechanical systems that pulsed with energies that registered as miniature stars on sensor displays. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving responses from all fleet elements. Doomsday protocols are authorized and ready. The final solution is requesting permission to activate their Nova Lance. Granted. Signal all Galactic Council forces to withdraw to minimum safe distance. What we're about to do violates several fundamental laws of physics, and the side effects will be visible from other galaxies." Captain Zephyra watched in fascination and horror as the human fleet transformed itself into something that looked less like a military force and more like a collection of cosmic disasters barely contained within metal hulls. "Admiral," she said quietly, "exactly what have you become?" Admiral Chin's scarred face showed an expression that might have been regret in another context. Something that can fight the impossible and win. Something that refuses to let the universe end while we still draw breath. Something that proves intelligence and determination can triumph over entropy itself. She paused, watching as her ships prepared weapons that could crack moons and tear holes in space-time. "We became what we had to become, Captain, and now we're going to teach the galaxy what that really means." In the depths of space around the Viridian system, sensors detected the approach of the human fleet. But what the swarm's collective consciousness perceived was not the arrival of potential prey. What they detected was the approach of something that had learned to hunt hunters, something that had spent centuries becoming the perfect predator of predators. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin in earnest, and the universe itself was about to learn why humans had never developed the concept of acceptable losses. The final battle between evolution and entropy, between the forces of creation and destruction, between the galaxy's desperate hope and its darkest nightmare, was less than 18 hours away. The convergence node hung in space like a cancerous growth against the stars, a twisted amalgamation of organic and technological components that hurt to perceive directly. The swarm had constructed it from the remains of 3 consumed worlds, incorporating the knowledge and technology of billions of dead beings into a structure that defied every law of physics and aesthetics. Captain Zephyra watched from the bridge of Admiral Chin's flagship as long-range sensors fed data about the abomination into the ship's tactical computers. The numbers were terrifying. The node was 12 kilometers in diameter and growing, its surface writhing with biological components that pulsed in patterns that suggested a vast, alien intelligence awakening. "Energy readings are off the scale," reported the sensor technician, his cybernetic implants glowing with processing heat. "Whatever that thing is designed to create, it's going to require more power than most stars produce in a year." Admiral Chun stood at the center of the bridge, her scarred hands manipulating holographic displays that showed the positions of both fleets. The human forces were arrayed in a formation that looked chaotic to untrained observers, but revealed a deeper pattern of overlapping fields of fire and mutual support. Behind them, at what the humans optimistically called minimum safe distance, the combined fleets of the Galactic Council waited to see if their newfound allies were salvation or simply a different form of destruction. "Status report on the Death World protocols," Admiral Chun commanded. Her tactical officer, a woman whose lower body had been replaced with a direct neural interface to the ship's weapon systems, responded with mechanical precision. "All Nova Lances are charged and ready. Vacuum implosion torpedoes are armed. The final solution reports readiness to deploy their stellar collapse weapon. Estimated time to target engagement, 14 minutes. Admiral Chin nodded grimly. "Signal all Council forces. Whatever happens in the next hour, do not enter the combat zone under any circumstances. What we're about to unleash will reshape local space-time for centuries." Captain Zephyra felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. "Admiral, what exactly are you planning to do?" "Something that violates the Galactic Treaty on Cosmic Weapons, the Universal Accords on Stellar Engineering, and probably several fundamental laws of physics," Admiral Chin replied. "We're going to teach the universe that some things are too dangerous to be allowed to exist." On the tactical display, the swarm's response to the approaching human fleet became visible. Bioships that dwarfed anything in the galactic databases emerged from the convergence node like antibodies responding to infection. Each one was unique, a hybrid of consumed technologies and organic engineering that represented the accumulated knowledge of dead civilizations. Swarm fleet composition is unlike anything in our databases, the sensor officer reported. They're using Altarian shield harmonics, Viridian weapon configurations, and what appears to be Sathari computational matrices. They've successfully integrated the technology of every civilization they've consumed. Dr. Yanara, monitoring from the ship's laboratory, added her analysis through the communication system. The biological components are even more concerning. They're not just using consumed technology, they're using consumed genetic material. Those bioships contain DNA from hundreds of different species, optimized for maximum combat effectiveness. The revelation sent waves of horror through the Galactic Council observers. The swarm hadn't just killed those civilizations. They had perverted their very essence, turning their biological heritage into weapons against the living. Admiral Chen's expression hardened. Then, it's time to show them what happens when they try to pervert human genetic material. She turned to address her communications officer. Signal all vessels. Execute Protocol Omega. Authorization code. Remember Terra. Across the human fleet, ships that had already seemed impossibly dangerous began transforming once again. Hull sections retracted to reveal weapons that had been hidden even from their allies. Energy signatures that registered as controlled stellar explosions began building in firing chambers that existed in folded spacetime. The human vessel Wrath of the Displaced extended mechanical arms that reached into dimensional pockets, withdrawing weapons that seemed to exist in more than 3 spatial dimensions. The Eternal Grudge began charging a cannon that created localized reversals in the flow of entropy itself. And, at the center of the formation, the flagship Never Again prepared to deploy humanity's ultimate expression of their refusal to accept extinction. "What is that?" Captain Zephyra whispered as sensors detected energy readings that belonged on the scale of galactic cores rather than individual starships. "That," Admiral Chun said with grim satisfaction, "is 800 years of accumulated rage given physical form. Every human who died to the swarm. Every world we couldn't save. Every civilization we watched burn. All of it channeled into a single moment of absolute refusal to let evil triumph." The swarm fleet accelerated toward the human forces, their bioships moving with coordination that spoke of a single, vast intelligence controlling every movement. They had learned from their consumption of galactic military knowledge, adopting formation tactics and strategic approaches that represented the accumulated wisdom of a dozen different species. But as they closed to weapons range, something unexpected happened. The human fleet didn't engage in traditional combat maneuvers. Instead, they did something that no military doctrine in the galaxy had ever contemplated. They began to sing, not with voices, but with their weapons, their engines, their very existence. Each ship began broadcasting on a frequency that resonated with the quantum foundations of matter itself. The combined chorus of the human fleet created a harmonic pattern that made reality itself vibrate in sympathy. "What are they doing?" demanded High Counselor Vex through the communication link with his observation fleet. Dr. Yanara's voice was filled with awe and terror as she analyzed the readings. "They're weaponizing harmony itself. They're creating a resonance cascade that's designed to disrupt the quantum coherence of the swarm's biological matrices." The effect on the swarm fleet was immediate and devastating. Bioships that had seemed invincible began to convulse as their hybrid organic technological systems fell out of phase with themselves. The careful integration of consumed technologies began to break down as the resonance pattern attacked the quantum bonds that held their stolen knowledge together. But the convergence node continued to pulse with growing intensity, its vast structure unaffected by the harmonic assault. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display with calculating eyes. Phase 1 successful. Beginning Phase 2. All vessels, prepare for reality modification protocols. The human fleet's formation shifted, ships moving into positions that formed a 3-dimensional mandala around the convergence node. As they reached their designated coordinates, each vessel began emitting a different frequency, their combined pattern creating something that existed beyond normal mathematics. They're creating a standing wave in space-time itself, Dr. Yanara reported, her voice barely audible over the cosmic harmonics. This is beyond technology. This is engineering reality itself. The convergence node suddenly pulsed with desperate intensity, as if aware that its existence was being threatened by forces it couldn't comprehend. Energy patterns that had been building toward the creation of something new began to destabilize as the human harmonic assault penetrated to the core of its being. And then, with a sound that registered across multiple dimensions, the node began to tear itself apart. But even as it died, it released something into space. Not the hybrid creation it had been designed to birth, but a signal, a message that propagated faster than light across the galaxy, and beyond, carrying with it the accumulated knowledge of every civilization the swarm had consumed. Admiral Chen recognized what was happening, and her scarred face went pale. Emergency transmission to all human vessels. Initiate memory wipe protocols immediately. That signal carries cognitive viruses designed to turn any intelligence that receives it into a swarm node. Across the human fleet, ships began shutting down non-essential systems and purging memory cores. But it was too late. The signal had already been received by monitoring stations across the galaxy. Within minutes, reports began flooding in from Galactic Council worlds. Artificial intelligences were beginning to exhibit strange behaviors. Automated systems were attempting to construct structures that matched patterns in the received signal. On 17 different worlds, technology had begun to evolve without guidance toward configurations that seemed designed for mass consumption of organic matter. But then, something unexpected happened. The infected systems began encountering something in their code that they couldn't overcome, fragments of human programming that had been integrated into galactic computer networks during the preparation for battle. Dr. Yanara's voice was filled with amazement as she analyzed the data. The human computer viruses are fighting the swarm cognitive viruses. Their programming is so aggressive and adaptive that it's actually immunizing our systems against the infection. Admiral Chen's predatory smile returned. We've been fighting cognitive warfare for 8 centuries. We learned to make our technology itself hostile to hostile thoughts. As the immediate crisis stabilized, the full scope of what had been accomplished became clear. The convergence node was destroyed, its potential creation prevented. The swarm fleet was crippled, their bioships struggling with internal contradictions created by the harmonic assault. And across the galaxy, human-infected computer systems were proving immune to swarm cognitive weapons. But, more importantly, the galaxy had seen something that changed the fundamental nature of cosmic conflict. They had witnessed a civilization that had learned to weaponize mathematics, harmony, and reality itself in service of an absolute refusal to surrender. Captain Zefra looked at Admiral Chun with new understanding. You didn't just learn to fight the swarm. You learned to fight the fundamental forces of entropy and destruction themselves. Admiral Chun nodded slowly. When a universe tries to kill you, you learn to kill it back. When entropy threatens to end everything you love, you learn to punch entropy in the face. When impossible odds say you should give up and die, you learn to redefine impossible. As the human fleet began the systematic destruction of the remaining swarm forces, automated systems throughout human space began powering down. The ancient weapons returned to their hidden vaults. The reality-modifying technologies folded back into dimensions where they couldn't accidentally unmake entire star systems. But the galaxy had been changed forever. The Galactic Council now knew that in the dark spaces between stars, there existed beings who had spent centuries becoming something beyond civilization, beyond natural evolution, beyond the normal limits of what intelligence could accomplish. And when the universe threatened extinction, when entropy seemed certain to triumph, when the impossible became inevitable, the galaxy could call upon the monsters humanity had chosen to become. Because sometimes, the only answer to cosmic horror was to become something even more terrifying in service of protecting what mattered. The swarm was defeated, but their threat would return in time. When it did, the galaxy would be ready, because humanity had taught them the most important lesson in cosmic survival. Never accept extinction as inevitable, and never stop becoming whatever you need to become to protect what you love. The Deathworlders had emerged from the shadows, and the universe would never be the same.